All right, I think we can get started. It looks like the trickle in has slowed down. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for today's OR-MEP webinar, where we'll be reviewing the open enrollment application process. My name is Mecca Abraham, the OR-MEP program manager. And before we dive into open enrollment, I wanted to first provide a quick overview on how you can participate in today's Zoom meeting. So all attendees are currently in listen-only mode and muted. We do, however, want to hear from you if you have any questions. You can enter questions via the Q&A button, and our plan is to take as many questions as we can at the end after we've completed our presentation. And any questions that we don't get to will be addressed in our follow-up communication. Also, if you want to enable captions, you can click on the Show Captions button. You can select the arrow up icon to select captions in English, as well as translated captions in another language. And finally, we are recording today's webinar, and we'll make the recording and a PDF of the presentation available on the OR-MEP website that will be shared via email to the OR-MEP newsletter subscribers. Here is the planned agenda for today. We'll start off with an overview on the OR-MEP program, and then we'll dive into the details of the open enrollment application process. We'll cover updates compared to the last round, and then we'll get into talking about each of the requirements and the criteria. And then finally, we'll end with a live demo of the application. And we'll wrap things up at the end, taking Q&A that you may have. So I'm joined by my colleagues, Julia Sinix, the OR-MEP Technical Manager, Kristen Bellows, OR-MEP Marketing Manager, who is monitoring the Q&A box for questions and any technical issues. And then also Tim Clark, OR-MEP Program Manager from the OHCS side and State Energy Program Coordinator. All right, so we'll get started with the overview on the OR-MEP program. So let's jump into that. The Oregon Multifamily Energy Program that you've heard us call it OR-MEP. That's what we refer to it in short form. So OR-MEP is brought to you by Oregon Housing and Community Services. The program provides cash incentives and design support for energy efficiency upgrades and affordable multifamily retrofits and new construction. The program is funded through public purpose charge funds collected by the two main investor-owned electric utilities in the state, Pacific Power and Portland General Electric. The goal of OR-MEP is to reduce the energy burden for residents with limited incomes across multifamily affordable housing. We do this through promoting energy efficient building design with working with affordable housing owners and developers, and then energy efficient building use with affordable housing residents. To be eligible for OR-MEP, projects must meet the following requirements. First, the project must be an existing or new construction multifamily property with at least 5 residential units per building. Campuses of 5 or more duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes are also eligible. The next requirement is the project needs to receive electricity from Pacific Power or Portland General Electric. Third requirement is that the property needs to be heated by a hardwired electrical heating system. And then finally, the project must meet program affordability requirements where residents in at least 50% of the units are at or below 80% area median income. And those units must remain affordable for at least 10 years. All right, so now that we've covered the basics of OR-MEP, we'll dive into the open enrollment application process. So we'll jump into that now. So as you all know, open enrollment, the current round is called 2024 Round 1, and it's now live and accepting applications. It opened last Monday, January 15th, and will be open for 45 days until Friday, April 1st. After the enrollment round closes, we expect to notify selected projects within 30 days. So by April 1st is our target date. So as a reminder, open enrollment is now the first stage in the process to participate in OR-MEP, and only selected open enrollment applicants are eligible for the next program stages to the right in this diagram, like reserving incentives and then installing energy upgrades. I will just make a note that, please note that when projects are selected for open enrollment, the project is selected to be funded. So what that means is after being selected, projects must finalize their energy efficiency plan or scope of work for us to be able to then reserve incentives and commit specific dollar amounts to your project. So while we will fund every project selected for open enrollment, the actual funding amounts are not confirmed by OR-MEP until you complete the incentive reservation process. So I just want to clarify because we had some questions on that recently. Moving on to open enrollment as an overview, as we previously shared in previous updates, due to the increased demand and interest in the program, we now have more projects interested in the program than funding available. So the open enrollment process is now a competitive application process with new DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion focused criteria to prioritize highest scoring projects for funding. The open enrollment prioritization criteria was co-created between the program team and the DEI coalition that we formed in 2022. And we work closely with the DEI coalition to incorporate updates this round after assessing the results from the last round where projects were selected last September. So open enrollment rounds are scheduled to be open twice annually, so every 6 months. The table on the bottom left is the scoring categories and weighting. We'll be going over each of the scored criteria next, but you'll see there is prioritization towards serving BIPOC communities and residents, communities with high energy burden, rural communities, and other communities that are more resource constrained. Naturally occurring affordable properties, which are considered currently unsubsidized or unregulated affordable housing. We're also prioritizing projects that are serving households with very low incomes and prioritizing nonprofit and housing authority applicants. So you can find the complete details that we'll be reviewing today in the Open Enrollment Application Guide, the document that's shown on the right in that screenshot. And that is found on the OR-MEP website within the Apply page. So here's an overview of the 5-year open enrollment funding calendar. We had shared this when we launched open enrollment last round. So this goes from 2023, last July, through 2027. We plan to have funding rounds every 6 months to ensure equitable distribution of the current $14 million that we have available in funding for the next 5 years. So last round, you'll see the first row is grayed out, 2023 round 1, because that has now been completed. And so right now we're in the current round for 2024 round 1, and we have 2.5 million available. And based on historical participation, we expect to enroll about 825 units in this round. The second table at the bottom notes the set-aside categories for this round, and for the 2.5 million that's in total available. So this round, we have made an update and adjusted the Pacific Power and Portland General Electric funding split to serve more projects in the more resource-constrained areas of the state within Pacific Power service area. So there is now 1.5 million in total available in Pacific Power service area, and 1 million available in Portland General Electric service area. And then within each utility, funding is equally split among new construction and existing multifamily properties. So 750 for Pacific Power, between new construction and multifamily, and then 500,000 for Portland General Electric for each new construction and existing multifamily. So if you have a potential project, you might be asking yourself, should I apply for this open enrollment funding round? We do encourage project teams to apply for this round if your project meets the following two prerequisites. And it's based on if you are selected for OR-MEP funding in this round. The first is that the project will finalize development of the energy efficiency scope to reserve incentives within 6 months of open enrollment selection. So based on our anticipated date of selecting projects by April 1st, you would need to finalize your energy efficiency scope and reserve incentives by October 1st. And then the second prerequisite is that the project will start construction or upgrades within 18 months of open enrollment selection. So that would be by October 1st, 2025. And the intent is that the projects that are applying are viable projects and can move forward if selected for funding within this timeline. So if your project is not yet ready to commit to these timelines, or you are awaiting confirmation of other funding sources in order to be able to move forward, we ask that you wait for a future open enrollment round to apply. And so the next one will be happen in July of this year. So for example, if you have applied for OHCS funding opportunities such as LIFT or LIHTC and are awaiting award notice, we ask that you wait to apply for the OR-MEP open enrollment until you have these larger funding sources confirmed, since we know that these are deciding factors of if a project can move forward. We want to be able to prioritize projects that are ready to move forward immediately after being selected, and projects with an uncertain viability to move forward takes away a spot from another project that could benefit from funding in this round. So trying to balance those timelines and providing funding for the projects that have the need for it. Please note, OHCS will enforce these deadlines for any projects selected during open enrollment rounds. Project teams that show a repeated pattern of not meeting deadlines or not making progress to move forward may be disqualified from participating in future open enrollment rounds. All right, so now I'm going to talk through the criteria updates compared to the last round. Based on the results and feedback we received on the last round that happened between July and September, we made the following updates to the scored criteria, and this is also listed in the application guide for your reference as well. So we did revise a few criteria. The first is project is in a BIPOC community. This criteria was revised to account for different BIPOC population conditions in rural versus non-rural areas. Previously, we just treated it the same regardless of location. And then the other criteria that was updated is project is primarily serving BIPOC community. This criteria was revised with different measurement using BIPOC culturally specific organizations' level of influence on a project as an indicator of the BIPOC community being reflected as residents of an affordable housing property. And we'll go into the details of those changes coming up. And then the third one that was revised is project is in a rural area. That criteria was revised and renamed to project location relative to available resources, with the intent to prioritize projects in locations that are currently underserved by OR-MEP, and due to their location away from urban centers, the projects are typically more resource constrained compared to projects located in more populated areas. So under this criteria, the highest points are awarded to rural projects. We added one new criteria. This is project is serving households with very low incomes. The OR-MEP affordability requirement that I talked about before requires that at least 50% of units serve residents that are at or below 80% area median income, and that those units remain affordable for at least 10 years. So with the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects that will go beyond the affordability requirements of the program and will have more affordable units serving households experiencing very low incomes. And finally, we removed 2 criteria. Project is planned to be a highly energy efficient performing building, and then the applicant entity's organization first time applying for OR-MEP. So with that, we'll jump into going through each of the criteria, and that will just provide some more details on how they are structured and with the new updates as well. So first criteria is project is in a BIPOC community. So this criteria looks at the location of the property in a BIPOC community. So scores are noted in the open enrollment application based on the project address provided, and it's sourced based off of census tract data. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects located in BIPOC communities. So as one of the updates, like I mentioned, the percent thresholds and points have been measured differently for rural and non-rural projects to account for the varying conditions across the state. And so you'll see from the tables, the one on the left is showing the rural projects and the right is for non-rural projects. So rural projects are starting at a lower threshold of at least 5%, with rate up to 20% will for full 5 points. Whereas for the non-rural projects, you can be eligible for 1 point, starting at 15% BIPOC population, up to 45% eligible for 5 points. So I do just want to clarify the definition of rural. We're aligning with OHCS's definition, and what that means. What's included in that is any city or town not in Portland Metro County, so not in Clackamas County, Multnomah County, or Washington County, and it also excludes the cities of Eugene, Springfield, Salem, Kaiser, Albany, Ashland, Bend, Central Point, Dallas, McMinnville, Medford, Newburgh, Redmond, and Woodburn. So there's an example to the right. So in this property in Salem is located in a census tract with 21.1% BIPOC. And comparing against the table, this project falls under the 15 to 29% threshold and is eligible for 1 point, and it's considered a non-rural project as well. I will now pass it off to Julia to talk about this next criteria.
Thanks, Becca. So this next criteria looks at how the project will serve BIPOC communities. And as Mecca mentioned earlier, this criteria was revised, and we're focusing on the project's level of partnerships with culturally specific organizations or BIPOC culturally specific organizations. And I'll get into the points associated with the types of activities that we're looking for on the next slide. But I wanted to discuss first the definition of culturally specific organization. And in the orange box is the OHCS definition that we're using. And I want to make sure that we're super clear that for the purpose of this application, we're talking specifically about BIPOC culturally specific organizations. And with that, culturally specific organization is a nonprofit that's serving historically underserved communities that are least likely to apply for housing. And it could be representative of a specific community or a segment of a community. And they have to be doing work related to housing, even if it's just a part of all of the services that they provide. And the last bullet is effectively, it means that the organization understands the unique needs of the specific community and has a history of meeting those needs in the region. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to look at the levels of influence and the kinds of activities that the organization has to be providing in order to receive the points. And I'm actually going to start at the bottom at the full 5 points. So in order to receive the full 5 points, the BIPOC culturally specific organization has to be either a sole or part owner of the property, or they are managing the property. And then for 3 points, I think of it as like the information and guidance is upstream from the culturally specific organization to the property. Specifically, the organization is contributing to the design and development of the property itself to meet the unique needs and preferences of the community. Or the organization is providing ongoing culturally sensitive support for residents and staff on site on a permanent basis. And then for 1 point, the information is downstream. So the culturally specific organization, the property is advertising or marketing through the BIPOC culturally specific organization. But the organization isn't necessarily providing support or guidance to the property in any significant way. And then so let's talk about how you're going to demonstrate the level of partnerships. So on the right-hand column there. So for 1, 3, and 5 points, we do ask 2 questions of all of them. So first, you're going to name the BIPOC culturally specific organization that you're working with. And we ask that you enter the organization's full name, avoid acronyms if you can. And if it's like a large national or global organization and you're working with a specific local chapter, then please indicate which one it is. And then for question 2, we want you to explain how the organization is effective in working with the BIPOC community in the region. And then finally, the last question only applies for the 3-point tier. We just want to understand the kinds of support that the organization is providing for the property. And we'll look at what those activities look like on the next tab. But before we move on, if you could click for me, we just want to note that if a narrative response is blank or incomplete, we will have to adjust the score to a 0. We will make every effort to send it back to you for corrections as long as there's time before the end of the open enrollment period. And so we ask that you send in your application earlier rather than later. And if you're unsure about your response or how to answer the questions, feel free to reach out to us or attend the office hours, and we'll be able to provide any support that you need. Okay, next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the 3-point tier has one additional question. And what we did is we captured some of the activities that really fit the spirit of the partnership activities that we're talking about. And I won't go into each one here, but for example, the organization is facilitating surveys or focus groups with current or potential future residents of a BIPOC community to make sure that their needs and preferences are being heard and incorporated, or they're providing ongoing language and application access support to prospective residents. And so we ask that you select all that applies to your partnership. And then if there are additional activities that you'd like to share with us, we do find a lot of value in learning about those. So if you click the other checkbox, there will be a text box for you to provide additional information. Okay, that's it for this one. I'll pass it back to Mecca.
Great, thanks, Julia. And when we get into the application demo, it'll be a little bit more clear how this is set up within the application directly. All right, so we will move on to criteria number 3, which looks at the high priority area index score, which is a cumulative index assessing energy burden. So compared to the last round, no changes were made to this criteria. Scores will be noted in the open enrollment application based on the project address provided, and it's based off of data found in the 10-year plan for reducing the energy burden, which was developed by the state in 2018. So the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects with high priority area index score for energy burden. And the index was created to more easily identify locations in Oregon with the greatest energy burden. This includes multiple factors that drive energy burden, such as affordability hardship due to low household income, poor home energy efficiency due to older home vintage, and then housing inequity issues due to ethnicity and race. So those are sort of the three components that go into the energy burden score. And so the scores are based on, there are 0 to 5 points awarded based off of different thresholds of the high priority index score. So this property in Salem is in a census tract with a high priority area index of 2.75. And comparing against the table, the project falls in the 2 to 2.99 range. And so it's eligible for 3 points. And then moving on to the next criteria, number 4 is about the project location relative to available resources. So this criteria, as I mentioned earlier in our updates, was previously only prioritizing rural projects, but has been updated this round to prioritize projects in locations that are currently underserved by OR-MEP, and due to their location away from urban centers, they are typically resource constrained. But to maintain we are still, the highest points are being awarded to rural projects. So scores will be noted in the application based on the project address provided. So you can see the score breakdown in this table. And so I did also include definitions. We align with OHCS on these definitions for project locations. So 2 that I specifically wanted to call out was urban outside of Multnomah, Washington, Clackamas, and Clackamas County. So this includes the cities of Eugene, Springfield, Salem, Kaiser, Albany, Ashland, Bend, Central Point, Dallas, McMinnville, Medford, Newburgh, Redmond, and Woodburn. And then in line with the previous definition of rural, rural is any city of town outside of those cities that I just listed, and then any city of town outside of Clackamas, Multnomah, or Washington County. And I did also just want to point out the project location must still be in Portland General Electric or Pacific Power Electric Service area to meet OR-MEP eligibility requirements. So this requirement supersedes the rural and urban definition. So one example, the city of Eugene is Eugene Water and Electric Board serves that area. So while Eugene is considered rural, it wouldn't qualify for OR-MEP because it wouldn't be served by PGE or Pacific Power. So the example that we're looking at for the project in Salem, this is considered in the category of urban outside of Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County, and would be eligible for 5 points. Okay, moving on to criteria number 5. This is for projects that are naturally occurring affordable housing properties, that we refer to in short form as NOAA properties. So this is a yes or no response made by the applicant, answering if the property is currently unsubsidized rental housing with no active affordable regulatory agreement with a federal, state, or local agency. So the program defines NOAA properties as unsubsidized rental housing that is affordable to residents with incomes between 60 to 120% of the area median income, and who typically can pay no more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities. NOAA property owners have typically never participated in an affordable housing program. So I do want to clarify on that point. If you have a project that has an expired regulatory agreement and you are applying for a new one or have been selected for other funding through OHCS or another agency that would require a long-term affordability agreement, the project would not be considered a NOAA. Really, the intent of this criteria is to prioritize the NOAA projects, and by enrolling in OR-MEP, these NOAA projects agree to meet the OR-MEP affordability requirements and enter into a 10-year affordability agreement where no such agreement exists on the property previously. This is in the intent to help preserve affordable housing in Oregon, and typically, OR-MEP is the only affordable housing program the project is enrolled in that has affordability requirements tied to the funding. So NOAA projects have typically never previously participated in affordable funding programs, and we do understand for these property types, it can be challenging to navigate the requirements that come with affordable housing programs. So if you are a NOAA project, please feel free to contact the program team by email or phone, which will be at the end of our slide, our contact information. If you need more application support for open enrollment, you can also join our office hours as well. I will pass it on to Julia.
Thank you. All right, so criteria 6 is for projects that are serving households experiencing very low incomes. And the OR-MEP affordability requirement, like Micah mentioned earlier in the requirements section, is 50% of the units are serving residents with household incomes that are at or below 80% area median income, or AMI. And the units must remain affordable for at least 10 years. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects that go beyond those requirements, and the program will have more affordable units serving households experiencing very low incomes. And then, so majority of the applicants, majority of the people probably on this call are non-NOAA projects. And then, so we'll be looking at the left-hand column first, or the table first. And so if you're already in an affordability agreement with OHCS or another regulatory agreement, or you've committed to entering into one like Mecca described, we ask that you select the level of affordability required by the agreement that you have or entering into. And so I'm going to start at the 5 points again. For the full 5 points, 100% of your units have to be serving residents at or below 30% AMI. And then for 3 points, your property is serving a mixture of 30% and 60%, or anything sort of in between, meaning you might have some units that are 50% and the rest are 20%. You would still be in this category. And then if 100% of your units are at or below 60% AMI, which tends to be like the majority of the projects that we see, you would qualify for 1 point. And then if you're just meeting the program requirement of 50% at or below 80% AMI, then there are no points for you in this category. And then I want to note that when we say 100% of the units, we can offer a little bit of flexibility here. If you have a property with some units that are reserved for management or for support staff, you're welcome to exclude those units from counting toward the 100%. And then for NOAA projects, so projects that are not currently in any affordable agreement and don't have any commitments to do so yet, we have a slightly different point system. So if you're NOAA, the application is going to ask you for the rent, your average rent for each of the unit size by the number of bedrooms. And you'll see it shortly in the demo that Mecca is going to do, but we'll provide the HUD rent limits for the county that your project is located, and then you will select the tier that best describes your property. Okay, I will pass it back to Mecca.
Great. Thanks, Julia. And we're now at the last criteria, number 7, which looks at the applicant entity, if it's a nonprofit or housing authority. This is a simple yes or no response and eligible for up to 2 points for nonprofits or housing authorities. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects and housing authorities that are often more resource constrained than for-profit applicant entities. All right, well, that was the last criteria. So thank you for sticking around all those details. I know there is a lot of information covered there. You can learn more in the application guide. It has the full details that you can read at your own pace as well. All right, so now we'll talk about the application submission process and what you can expect. So open enrollment is open for 45 days and will close on Friday, March 1st, 2024. And applications must be submitted no later than 5 p.m. on March 1st. And any application submitted after this time will not be evaluated. So we ask that you submit completed applications to the program email, OHCS Multifamily Energy at trccompanies.com. And I did also want to call out, program staff will confirm receipt of the application within 2 business days. If you do not receive a confirmation, we do ask that you contact us at our phone number, which is listed here. This is especially important due to increased email securities. We have seen some emails come to our junk and spam email folders, and we are continuing to monitor these folders to ensure we receive and review all submitted applications. But just to help us in that effort, if you don't receive confirmation, please do contact us as well. Thank you. And as far as the review process, what that looks like, all applications in response to this open enrollment round are reviewed and competitively ranked. So once the close occurs on Friday, March 1st, our team will then review all the applications. So applications that have the highest score within each set-aside category will be recommended for funding as funding resources allow. And we anticipate issuing notice of selected projects within 30 days of enrollment closing. So we're anticipating that to be by Monday, April 1st. And as far as application support, going forward, oops, have a typo there, but that's supposed to say January 31st. But office hours, we have office hours happening for the next 5 weeks from January 31st to February 28th. They are listed on our website, so you can register through there and at OregonMultifamilyEnergy.com/apply. So feel free to stop by to ask us a question about the application process, eligibility, or if you have specific project questions. These office hours will be on Zoom, and you can find the registration link on the website. All right, so now we'll do a live demo of the application. So I'm gonna switch gear, sharing my screen. So just a minute there. Okay, so you should now be seeing the program website. I'm going to start from where you can find the application. So on our program website, at this first headline, it's a note about that applications are now accepted. So you can navigate through the Apply Now button there. Alternatively, under Learn How to Participate, you can also get to the same page. So we go there. This is kind of the place that you can go to check all there is about open enrollment. So you can find the application guide here that's linked here. So if you click that, there's a PDF document with that. And then the application is here, but I'll also just show a couple of other areas. You can register for the office hours here as well. And yeah, and then as we get FAQs, we'll update the FAQ section as well. So to get the application, you can find it at this link here. And when you click it, you should find an application to download and open. And opening up for me right now. Okay, so when you first open your when you download the application, open it, it is a Excel workbook. So one of the first steps that you want to take as you're opening it is to enable editing. So click enable editing. And then you also want to enable content as well. That is to run the lookups that we have for the address lookups based off of the census tract location. So I'm going to click enable content. And then I do just want to call out, we do have these reminders in our instructions section here. So click enable editing and enable content. So you also must have an internet connection while working in this application. This is for doing the address lookup function. So if you see down below in the warnings, invalid address, one step is to confirm your internet connection. That is one area. So this relies on that lookup function for the US Census Bureau census tract. I do also want to point out for Mac users, the lookup function may not work for you due to just how Excel for Mac versus Windows operating systems work. So you may have a invalid address error if you're running on Excel for Mac. If you do run into that error, you can send your file, email your file to the program staff, and we can correct it on our end and get that error resolved for you. And with the application, you'll want to fill out all light green shaded cells. And so we'll just jump into walking through. And once you're completed submitting, you want to submit it to our program email, which is listed here. So I'll just walk through the application. One of the areas that you'll see right now, because we've just opened it, we do have these warnings to help you along to identify what sections you need to fill out. So this is a good reference to know what sections you might not have filled out. So right now it says application complete. And if everything is complete, when you have filled everything else out, you'll want it to say application complete. And that's sort of your sign that everything is filled out and you can submit it. So as far as the sections go, the application summary, this is the running tracker of the points as you enter in information in the application. So let's just start to put together a sample project here. And I'm going to do that example project that I had in the presentation in Salem. So you'll see before, I will get rid of Salem. So you'll see right now, I put in a street address. I don't have the full address in there. So it's displaying these invalid address warnings. But once I enter the full address, it will recognize the address. And I will just call out, it's kind of hard to recreate this situation, but if you do run into an invalid address area, try different variations of your address. We have seen a couple of instances where maybe the abbreviation of street works, or maybe you have to spell out street fully, or if there's a directional NE versus spelling out northeast, it may make a difference. So try that out. It's really hard to know what works and what doesn't work. But if you're still running into errors, feel free to send it over to us, our team, and we can troubleshoot it for you. You can send in your draft application and we'll troubleshoot it and try to correct it for you. All right. And so just in the project information section, there's just basic information that we request, the city, zip code, and then all of the cells that are white are auto formula, so those will auto populate based on inputs. And so we'll just say this is a new construction project with 50 units. So we've completed the project information section. Now we'll move on to the applicant information. So we ask that you enter information for the applicant entity that will receive program incentives. So I'll just put in a project. I'm not actually gonna do the full details just for the sake of time, but we ask for the name, the street address, the city, state, and zip code. And then in this drop down, applicant company entity type, there's a drop down with different options. So I'll say that this is a nonprofit. And we do ask for the contact person that is the authorized signatory. So this should be the authorized signer and have the ability to bind the project and applicant entity to OR-MEP program agreement. So we ask for the name, email, and phone number. We also recognize that that signatory may not be the primary contact to coordinate items regarding this application. So that's where the second input is for, and you can enter the name, email, and phone. And if it's a different company that primary contact is at, you can also list their company details as well. And then the next section is on program eligibility. So these are the eligibility questions for the question. So is the project located in Oregon? You can select from the drop-down. Is the project a multifamily property with at least 5 residential units per building or a campus of 5 or more buildings? And no single family units included in the unit count. So we'll say yes to that. And then for new construction projects, will this project receive electric service from Portland General Electric or Pacific Power? So I will say yes, and you can select if it's PGE or Pacific Power. And will the apartment be heated by a hardwired electrical heating system? Say yes. And does the project meet OR-MEP affordability requirements? So you want to select that, yes or no. And do you plan to install energy upgrades that result in electric savings? So those are really very critical questions in order to confirm the eligibility for the project. If you select no, that will sort of be your warning sign that the project is not eligible. And if you have questions or in a unique scenario, you can reach out to our project. But we do ask that you answer these questions to the best of your ability of what you know about the project at the moment. All right, and then the next section is open enrollment not scored criteria. This goes first on prerequisites. So this talks about the prerequisites that we talked about before. First asking if the project will finalize the reserving incentives within 6 months of open enrollment selection. So if you select yes, or no. And if you select no for any of these questions, it will give you sort of a warning that you're not meeting the prerequisites. And we do ask for, so when will you reserve incentives? We do ask some follow-up questions for a time range there. So you can select from the options there. We do ask dates about if the project will meet the next prerequisite for starting construction or upgrades within 18 months. So that's a yes or no drop down as well. And then we do ask specifics on the dates. So can put an example date. So for this project, if I'm anticipating it would start April of 2025, and then the completion date. Yeah, so just pay attention to these dates. If you're not going to start within 18 months, you will get warning signs there as well. We are really looking to confirm those prerequisites in this application here. And then here are some informational questions asking about funding sources that are in place to move forward with the project. We do know just from our experience that the other funding sources are very critical. So we just want to have more information on that to ensure that the project can move forward as well. And then, there's a narrative response to provide more information there. And then if you have an energy consultant or a third-party verifier, which are roles that you'll need to work with to develop the energy efficiency scope. So there's some options there to select as well. So those are sort of the basic informational eligibility questions. And then this is where we then get into section about the scored criteria. So you'll see for the most part, for address-driven criteria, it will automatically calculate based off of the address that you entered above. So for this first one, project is in a BIPOC community. You'll see that this project is eligible for 1 point based off of what we reviewed before. So that one's pretty straightforward. There's no inputs that are needed. The second one, project is primarily serving BIPOC communities. This is the one that Julia had talked about. So the first question is asking to select the level of influence a BIPOC culturally specific organization will have. And there are different drop downs, and depending on the selection that you make, the supporting questions will be displayed based on what's required. So if a BIPOC is culturally specific organization is a solar part owner, it's eligible for 5 points. And we ask that you answer these 2 supporting questions. And for the 3.1 that Julia had described, there is this checklist for the question, how is the culturally specific organization contributing to design or operation? So this is a simple checklist of the options. So you can just select what's applicable. And if you have an other instance, there's a text box here that you can enter information into as well. And then moving on to the high priority area index for the energy burden. This is also auto calculated based on the address. So this project is eligible for 3 points. Criteria number 4, project's location relative to available resources. This is also address driven. So this location is eligible for 5 points. And then project is naturally occurring affordable housing. This is a yes or no response. So if you say no, you can 0 points. And then this response to this question triggers number 6. Project is serving households with very low income. So for non-NOAA projects, we ask that you select the percent of affordable units and income levels the project will serve from this dropdown. And if you select that the project is a NOAA project, there's this table where you can enter the quantity of units at each unit size and the average monthly rent. And as an example, let's say there are 25 studios at 1,100 rent. So that's showing that the rent limit at 80% HUD rent limit is met. So then you can select what is the average monthly rent based off of this table. So this is based off of the location, the HUD rent limit by county. And then the last criteria, this is also a simple yes or no. If the applicant entity is a nonprofit or housing authority, select no or yes. So no is 0 points, and then yes is 2 points. So those are the main fields to fill in. And I haven't completely filled out this, so you'll see I have warning signs for please enter response. And in several areas. So at the top, I'm still getting the application incomplete warning. But if you were to resolve all of those, you should finally end up with an application complete notification. So that is the overview of the application. And I know we are short on a few minutes, so we'll try to take a few questions, and then we'll follow up in our email with FAQs with the remaining questions we weren't able to get through. All right, so Kristen, I'll let you maybe pick a few questions that we can fit.
Great, that sounds good. So I'll try to start with some of the more general questions, and then like Mecca said, I think we can follow up with an FAQ. And also, I think for some questions that might be a little more specific, our team can also reach out directly to the person who asked those. So to start out with, Mecca, could you help explain how we're kind of, I guess, evaluating whether a project has already started construction if they're still eligible for OR-MEP? So if a project has already started construction, are they still eligible for OR-MEP? And maybe speak to that a little bit.
Yes, so if your project has started construction, you can apply for open enrollment. Although you'll just have to go through the process. We can't obviously guarantee if you'll be selected, but you still can submit an open enrollment application to be considered for funding. We are keeping this in place due to this being the second round after being on a wait list for several years. So we know many projects have started on construction that were previously on the wait list.
Great. Next question is, does the 18-month timeline start after selection or at the application time?
The 18 months start of construction starts at the time of open enrollment selection.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see. One comment I just want to call out for our group is just clarifying that NOAA can be a confusing acronym, and in that there is also a lender called NOAA as well. So just kind of flagging that, and I think hopefully we can make sure to spell that acronym out where we use it to help clarify.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a term that's used across the country, but in the context of Oregon, it's I agree, confusing. So our team is trying to find a better term for that. So stay tuned for updates. And if you have any additional feedback on what term you'd prefer, please reach out to us.
Great, thanks, Becca. Let's see. Do houseless shelters qualify for OR-MEP?
Um, I think it, I would recommend that project reach out to us. I think to understand just better about the configurations of the property. If I think we want to try to serve as many projects as we can, especially with the state trying to serve more houseless shelters. But I think we just need to know the configuration of the building a bit more because we typically treat it based off of a number of units and if they're rental housing as well. So yeah, if you want to share some more details on your project, we can answer that better.
Great. Let's see. I think we can do one more question, and then I think we'll definitely follow up individually with some of the questions that came in and also work on an FAQ that we can share. So can OR-MEP be used as gap funding? Do all sources need to be secured before applying for funding?
Uh, I would say like typically the larger funding sources that we see come through like LIFT or LIHTC or tax credits, that's usually what is needed for to see a project move forward. But if the project, if this is to fill gaps, and you are doing energy efficiency upgrades and you have mostly all of your other funding to move forward, I think you can certainly apply.
Great. And I saw a question come in about projects that have already started construction. Again, I think this is a common one, so we'll make sure to capture that in the FAQ. But the answer is yes, that projects that have already started construction can still be considered. Should we wrap up there, Mecca? We didn't have time to get through all the questions, but we'll definitely do some follow-up.
Yeah, we can follow up on the questions. I do also want to make a note that I forgot to mention in our content presentation. If you applied in the previous round and were not selected for open enrollment, we do ask that you reapply because the criteria has changed. We can't reuse your application, and submitting a new application is our indicator that you're applying for this funding round. Yeah, but otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you for your questions. We'll follow up in our program email with the ones that we weren't able to get to. And if you have more specifics, join us for our office hours starting next week.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.